think that I'm really glad you raised this issue in the context of China, too.
Yes.
You know, you said it very well in your remarks, but you also know that there are very few topics that are bipartisan in Washington these days. China is certainly one of them. We've done a fair bit of talking here. You took some action in the province in terms on Chinese procurement.
That's right.
And issuing some restrictions. Talk to us a little bit about that in some detail.
Well, we're just very simple. We're banning China from any investments in critical minerals. They'll use those critical minerals to come back and haunt us one day in Canada and the US. Who do we want to give them to? Closest friends and allies, the US. And we need to make sure that we start speeding up, just like President Trump said. Let's speed up the process. It just goes on and on and on. Well, things are going to change. I think both countries need to change. We need to get shovels in the ground, critical minerals out and into the factory floors.
Yeah. Well said. Very well said. That should be all of our goals jointly. You hit on another, I think, really important topic in your remarks for the U.S. business community. Mm-hmm. We're going to get past, I'm confident, we're going to get past this stage of tariff threats and threatened tariff war. The next stage is, which could come in very quick sequence, will be the Kuzma review.
Yes.
A huge challenge that we at the Chamber have been certainly illustrating for now the last 2 years plus is the lack of compliance and enforcement from all three governments. Each one of them, the automotive sector that's critical to the province, the U.S., there was a decision in Canada's and in Mexico's favor that's more than a year and a half old. The dispute resolution panel ruled in Canada and Mexico's favor against the U.S., and the U.S. has still not implemented that ruling. That's an example of something that the U.S. has to comply with. You raised the DST, the Digital Services Tax. Yes. Another issue for us in the private sector is C11, online streaming bill. Tell me a little bit more about sort of how you're approaching those kind of discriminatory measures from the province. I appreciated your strong statement and why you think they're impediments also to our shared prosperity and shared progress.
Well, we have unnecessary taxes. The DST. Every Republican, every Democrat agrees. We shouldn't have that tax. We shouldn't have a federal carbon tax that makes us uncompetitive around the world. It just adds cost onto the goods that we manufacture across the board. Let's cut the regulations. Let's get things moving. We know China, there's no regulations there. They get a phone call and say, start digging, and that's it. And that's what happens. And manufacturing, they can build a city of 1 million people in 3-4 years. Yeah. It just goes up. So I just can't emphasize enough that with the USMCA deal, we have to come together. And whoever doesn't want to play at the table fairly, then they leave the table. And then we move on. But I think it's so important that we have 3 great countries and we move together, because if you put everything aside, it's us against the world. I'll tell you that right now. When all heck breaks loose, and hopefully that will never happen, well, who do you turn to? You turn to your family members. And I'm going to give you a little story, and this has nothing to do with the USMCA, but we've had the threats of tariffs go, and and when that hurricane hit North Carolina and Florida, without asking, we sent endless amount of, we call them hydro linemen, electricity linemen. They loaded up their trucks, they headed down there. And then the California fires. And sure enough, the tariffs were peaking a little bit. We put a call out in Ontario to urban firefighters. We had more urban firefighters ready to suit up. We had to cap it at 300, ready to hop on the plane, put their lives in danger to protect our family members. We had water bombers already stationed. We flew them out to BC to fly down there. Unfortunately, the story goes, they said they didn't have the water for the water bombers. But my point here is, when a family member needs help, you put everything else aside and you go help them. Because I know Americans would do the same for Canada.